Good morning.
All right, just so that everybody might have on their screen, but we're going to record this session. I think that we should get going. I'm going to do just the briefest of introductions. My name is Hugh Bleemer. I'm with the Chester County Community Foundation. With me today is Timmy Nelson and Reverend Dr. Richelle Foreman Gunter, who are going to go through their presentation on DEI. I'm going to share the screen, and Timmy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Hugh. Hey, first of all, thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to hopefully an informative and hopefully have some time for some lively conversation also. As Hugh mentioned, I'm Timmy Nelson. I work with the Community Foundation as the outreach advisor, and I'll let my counterpart introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Reverend Richelle Foreman Gunter, and I am an associate member of the minister of St. Paul's Baptist Church, a minister of the Westchester area NAACP, and I have a background of over 20 years in community mental health and serving on a number of boards. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about boards and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Dr. Richelle. We're going to, just so you all know, we're going to kind of alternate on both of these slides. We both are excited about this presentation. It means so much to us in our professional lives, but also personally too. And hopefully you'll see some things there that apply to all of you. And again, we look forward to sharing with you today. Can you want to go to the next slide? Hugh? Thank you. Just as a reminder, there's multiple parts about board responsibilities. I think you've seen this slide a few times before. You'll probably see it a few times going forward. But there's 7 key territories here we kind of focus on as far as board responsibilities. We're going to touch on each of these things as you go through this presentation. You'll see some commonalities here. And hopefully we'll make those connections for you. And if not, don't hesitate to ask us, okay? Hugh, next slide.
That one. Yeah, perfect. So today's focus is going to be on how you develop the relationships that allow you to recruit and bring in the kind of board membership that you would like to have. One of the key things that I always offer to people who are thinking about their boards and what their boards look like is to remember that one of the things that boards really have to become good at is quickly evaluating and assessing if the recruits and the development of board members is working well. Great. Understand why it's working well. And if it's not working well, to quickly be able to do an assessment and make the kinds of adjustments that you need to make. And that doesn't necessarily mean removing someone from a board, but it does mean that you remember your initial mission of who you wanted to bring on the board and make sure that you assess that you've brought the right folks onto your board. So reflection and self-examination are really key. And I always encourage people to ask themselves, are you sure that you really want a diverse, inclusive board? And if you do, know what that means for your board. Next slide.
And this slide is really jam-packed. This is one they're all good, but this is one you can use as a template, in my opinion. The board is in the business of governing the organization. And I need you to really keep that in focus. So the board is not just somebody that is a friend we want to join and have an opportunity to spend time with them, but every board member serves a distinct purpose. And if you're on a board that doesn't have that, it's something I encourage you to work toward. That puzzle in the top corner, covers a lot of different territories there. And I encourage you to take a look at that and glance at that sometimes. But for some of the basic areas, first of all, your board members, do they really want to be there? I mean, I have run across people on boards. They're like, well, I was asked to do it, so I'm here, but it's not really my thing. When I talk to the chair of that board, my comment would be is that, you know what, nice person, but maybe they're not the right fit for this board because your job is to govern the organization. And when you think about the people on your board, the expertise that you need, if you don't have people that fit these categories, I would say to you, search for those individuals, do some networking to find those individuals. You also need people that have the resources and connections. Every board member should bring something to the table, a contribution to the organization. You know, geography. If you have a board that covers a good part of Chester County, you might want to consider saying, do I have somebody that fits each of the demographics in Chester County, the four corners of the county? Do you have people that fit those main four areas? You know, of course, the obvious one: male, female, sexual orientation, gender identity. Your board, you might want to consider the religious background of folks on your board, depending on what kind of work you're working on, what kind of initiatives you have. It could be valuable to have somebody of different religions and seek those individuals out. And of course, people that are differently able. Those are folks that you want to make sure are included in boards, sometimes get overlooked. And we're going to talk further about how to find some of these people. But this is this should be almost like your go-to sheet to say, what does my board look like? If it doesn't match some things here, we need to do some work. And we're going to talk about how to do that. Hugh, next slide, please.
So on this next slide, we talk about identifying board prospects. And I just want to spend a moment saying that what Timmy said is absolutely correct. If you want diversifying or diversity, you need to be sure that you are looking for people on your board who are different. Many of us have been recruited to boards because we had a friend, we knew somebody on that board, they knew us and they invited us to join that board. But often that doesn't represent diversity because many of us share the same ideas about governing and administration that our friends share. So if you are really looking for difference, you have to be sure that when you identify board prospects, that those people come from a different perspective. They may come from a community that's related to the product that your organization is delivering. But at the same time, you don't want everybody on your board to be necessarily of the same thinking, of the same background. So that does require a bit of work. And some of that work can happen through the networks that you have already. Sometimes you have to go outside of your network, or you have to ask for referrals from within your network. So consider, do you need to build a new network? And if you do, give yourself time to develop that and to think about the work that involves getting out there, connecting with people that don't travel in your circle, that you don't usually connect with, and how are you going to meet them, and how are you going to engage them in a way that interests them in being part of what you're trying to do. This slide resonates with me because the same old thinking will get the same old results. So really, we need to think about diversity as embracing difference, doing something different, and attracting people who are different than we are. Next slide.
Yeah, a quick comment on Dr. Richelle's slide just saying how to meet and how to engage. And we're going to talk about some things, but it's when you're building a board, you have to do that. You have to meet new people and engage new people. Now, this slide gives me a chance to go back to my history. I didn't say in the beginning, but I spent 38 years at UPS. 20 of those years, I was an HR director in various states. And then the last 13 years I spent in government relations. I was a lobbyist, you know. So, but this slide speaks to my former career at UPS in so many different ways. Recruiting affirmatively. Affirmative action, if you, and I'm going to take a few pages out of the book of hiring here, because that's what we're talking about, hiring board members, okay? Affirmative action is the right thing to do. That just means you're affirmatively looking for people that are different, okay? But you're not doing quotas. It's so easy to say, you know what, we don't have any people of color on our board, or people of whatever ethnic background, or females on our board. Let's go find a person that fits that category. That is wrong.
Yes.
That is wrong.
Yes.
Now, if you do it as a quota just to fill a number, that is wrong. If you do it affirmatively, then you're doing the right thing, okay? You want to make sure the people that you select have the opportunity for growth and for development. And they have to have the core skills you think they need to be in that job. And by you being a current board member, you have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for, okay? You don't want people that are tokens to fill that quota. You want people that are actually affirmatively filling that spot and have the skills that you need to do that job. And keep in mind, when you look at this, you're saying, here's a person with a different background. They've got the skills, but a different background. That means they bring something more to the table than just another person that looks like the rest of the people on the board already. Rules of engagement. You think about, when you think about the rule of three, there's a lot of things that fit the rule of three. You know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You know, that's one that comes out of my mind quickly. You know, but we think about threes all the time. So I'm going to share with you the rule of three when it comes to employment and recruiting, which this is recruiting and employment. If I got a great job, if I got a great recruiter, and I've got a great hiring manager, I can get and maintain the people that I need. So first of all, tell me what it is about this board membership, this new job you offer me, that's great for me, and how it works out for me. Okay. And you being that person that's recruiting, or whoever's doing recruiting, they need to be able to sell what the organization is. So do I have my elevator speech where you talk about the organization and why we need you and why it's going to be beneficial, mutually beneficial for us to be together. Okay. And then the hiring manager, that's the rest of the board also. Because now when I walk into the boardroom the first time, I should be welcome. I should be included as part of that team. So for me, the rule of three for this area, that's what it comes down to. The other part about it too is that look for people with non-traditional backgrounds and experiences. One thing I love about America is we truly are a melting pot. Have we got things to work on? No question about it. But where else can you go in the world where you can find people of so many different backgrounds? We have to learn how to work with that and say, what's the benefit of doing that? In many cases, you'll find a lot of benefits when you get past the initial conversation stage to learn about that person. But to do this, you need to go to places that you don't normally go. And there's an event that I started attending recently that is not a group of Black people, it's a group of Latino people. And I started attending this luncheon because I want to learn firsthand how life is, how it impacts this group of individuals, and what that means for me going forward as I continue to try to develop myself. So sometimes you got to extend yourself to go someplace, to be someplace where you didn't normally go. And you'll be surprised when you go. Every time I've done that, I've been so welcome because people say, you're somebody different for us too, so let's learn from you too. It's mutually beneficial. Remember, wherever you go, you're prospecting. Hugh, next slide, please.
Yeah, that's the rule of recruiting is that you're recruiting everywhere. Every time that you're connecting with people and you have an opportunity to build an authentic relationship, you are recruiting. You're in recruiting mode. And so sometimes that's not easy to always remember. Often we go through sort of a recruiting phase. It's like, okay, we need to recruit for our board, and we think about that and what are we going to do in the short term, maybe the next 3 to 6 months. But when you're recruiting successfully, you need to be thinking about it all the time, wherever you go, which means sometimes you're going to go places and it's not necessarily going to be an opportunity to recruit somebody because it's the same circle. Other times you're going to be places where it was the last thing you were thinking about and discover that you are meeting people and making the kind of connections that will help you achieve your goal. So events, programs, particularly things that you don't usually do in your circle of friends, are opportunities for meeting and building new relationships and being welcoming and inclusive. And what does that look like? Okay. And I think one of the most important things that it looks like is, while we're willing to talk about ourselves, we express a real interest in getting to know and learning about the person that we're meeting, possibly for the first time. Or maybe it's somebody that you met earlier, but you've never had an opportunity to ask them about themselves. What are they involved in? What kinds of things they have a passion and commitment for? And so being welcoming and inclusive is really important. And are we really means that there's a difference between welcoming and inclusive and patronizing, or asking the questions just because it's good manners to ask the questions, that we're really interested in other people and what they could bring to the board. So I spent a lot of time talking about that because it's really important for that person to walk away from the conversation saying, wow, she was really interested in me and what I think. So something to really consider. You also want to decide whether board service is appropriate for people that you're trying to recruit, because they're committed to your mission, possibly invested in your mission, that they understand how nonprofits work, that they can, this is really important. Sometimes what happens in a board meeting has to stay in a board meeting until the appropriate time. And that they respect protocols and group processes, and also can be an ambassador for what you're trying to do. But it's really important because boards operate by a set of guidance and governing rules, and the person who comes in to serve on that board has to, one, understand what those rules are and be willing to abide by them. And so that in itself becomes something that you have to recruit and talk about, because it is really, really important. This is about service. And often a lot of us, we can have a list of the boards that we serve on, but we're really serving the board. And it's less about us and more about ensuring that they accomplish their mission. Next slide.
Okay, I mentioned before the puzzle slide. Remember, that tells you a lot of things that you need to take a look at. Here's one of these. This slide. I encourage you also to take a close look at it, because here's a slide that goes back to Dr. Richelle's first slide, where it talked about self-examination and self-reflection. And this can be difficult. I'm not going to kid you. This can be difficult.
Yeah.
You know, but here's where we're going to ask you, and there's a link you can click on to get a copy of this. But here's what we're going to ask you to really take a look at yourself and your board and say, are we really welcoming and inclusive?
Yeah.
And there's some great questions here to ask of yourself. And if you're serious about diversifying your board, be serious about answering these questions.
Yeah.
And don't feel as though if you didn't answer the question the way you think you should have, that's not a negative. That's being you're examining yourself.
Right.
And this is your starting point. So what do we need to do differently is what these questions tell us. You know, the things we're doing great, let's continue those things. Let's keep doing those things great. But the things that we're not doing well, how do we as the board really make a difference, you know? And you ask yourself the question, when it's all said and done, do I really want to have people different than what I look like on my board, or different backgrounds than mine on our board? And so again, this is self-reflection, self-examination time. And I encourage you, you're going to need a copy of the presentation. I encourage you to click on this link and take a look at these questions on here, because you'll be surprised on some of the responses you give sometimes. And don't take it as a negative against yourself. Take it as a learning experience, because at some point in time, we all go through this, but we have to look outside ourselves and say, what is the right thing to do? Okay.
And Tim, before we go to the next slide, I would just say that self-assessment is really key, because this is an opportunity, particularly early on, to make small adjustments, okay? And not to have to abandon your ideas about how you were going to recruit the right board members. Here you make small adjustments. You clarify what you meant when you identified your mission for your board. And so this can help you tune in, focus in on any area that might have been a bit too ambivalent, a bit too unclear when you talked about board recruitment. So this particular link can really help you focus in on some of the places where you might not have the clarity that you want to have when you're thinking about developing your board and attracting the right people to your board. And if you're really ready for the kind of diversity that you have talked about. And so use this as a real opportunity to think about where you are and where you want to go, and what are the adjustments that you might want to make in order to hit the target. Sometimes people talk about, well, change the goal. And I encourage you to keep the goal. If the goal was created strategically, keep the goal and adjust what the steps that you need to take in between to reach the goal. And so I want to encourage you, this is out here, take advantage of it. You don't have to recreate the wheel, but to really think about honestly assessing and evaluating and making the adjustments that you like to make. Next slide. Retaining diverse leaders. So I think that what's listed here on the slide is really good and is really helpful. Retention is grounded in good relationships, good working processes, that people really feel like what they are doing is valued and that they are valued, even if it consumes more time than they imagined, even if it's more work than they thought they would be putting in. If they feel valued, if they feel like they are making a difference, if they feel like the contribution that they made couldn't be made by anyone else, then you retain your leaders. What often happens is people are overwhelmed with the amount of work. They're not necessarily grounded in authentic relationships, and they go off to either leave your board or to join another board where they will have that sense of being valued, and you're left having to retain leaders again. It's like employment, okay? It's not that salary is everything. It's the working relationship. It's who you're working with and the work that you're doing and the value of that that often grounds people and keeps them. And so what you don't want to be is a mill for board members, where they come and they stay for a shorter period of time than their commitment and they move on to some other board. and now you're left with retaining again. So think about how retention will play a role in your board, and be sure that you are effective in establishing that so that people serve out their terms.
Let's hang on to this slide for a second. If I could add a couple of things. Remember we talked about the rule of three. You know, I got a great job. I got this great board job. I got a person that's doing a great job recruiting. Now, here's where the hiring manager comes in. This is the person that's going to retain this person. And let me share a story with you. I am from Michigan originally. My hometown is Muskegon, Michigan. And I was managing a package operating center for UPS in Muskegon, Michigan. Got a phone call from my boss one day, and he says, we want all of our managers to join a board. And so I was assigned to the local United Way board. Had no clue. I did a great job, I thought, of managing a package operating center, but I had no clue about board membership. So as a dutiful employee, I went to the board meetings. I sat there lost. And that would have been a negative spot in my career. And for me personally, had not been a couple folks at the United Way decided to embrace me and say, let's talk to you about what we do specifically at United Way. Let's talk about how you can assist us. Let's talk about how you can be a good board member. They embraced me and took the opportunity to teach me my role as a board member. Here's been a long-term effect on that. I share with you, I've been at UPS, I was at UPS 38 years before I retired. Every time I relocated 5 times. Every time I relocated, I found the local United Way. And to this day, the local United Way here, I've been involved with since I moved here in 2003. Okay, because that United Way organization showed me how to do things. And I've been involved with other boards, but the United Way board is always in a board I sought out no matter where I moved to, because they retained me, you know, from that first opportunity. Hugh, next slide, please. Okay, so where do you find these people? That's always a big question, okay? How do we find the people that we're looking for? Yeah, we know what we need to do. We know we need to hang on to them. We know we need to have a good job, but how do we find these people? Here's where you have to stretch yourself again a little bit, okay? Referrals and introductions. Always operate as so you're recruiting. So anytime you meet someone, you talk to someone, think to yourself, is there a connection with the board I'm looking for with this? Is this person a connection for our board? What are they interested in? Get to know that person a little bit. See about their likes and their interests. And you can do that in a short conversation to learn about what people are doing. In many cases, when you meet someone new and you're having that initial conversation, you talk about what's important to you, who you are, things you're involved in. Include your board membership in it and tell people about your board and see how they respond to your sharing them about your board. Invite them possibly to learn some more about the board. Invite them to maybe not just go online and check it out, but to perhaps go to an event with you if there's an event coming up so they can get to know some of the other folks. Some great places to do that. You see here, universities, alumni, faculty, staff, all great opportunities in these local locations to find new and upcoming board members, okay? Professional trade organizations, you know, and the list goes on. I'm not going to read every one of these, but even the diverse groups, if you look at the top corner, organizations representing diverse groups. Dr. Richelle and I had a conversation with NACP earlier this morning and talked about some things with them. Great opportunity to find some people that are different from you, have different views on some things, but think about that. You want people with different views than you have, because that's when you really learn what needs to happen with your organization, how to make your organization more effective. So here's another list of a page of good resources, and we can help you with some of these resources if you like us to. We can help make some of these connections for you. That's part of what we do, and we want to help you to understand what you need to do, but also help guide you where you want to go. So never hesitate to reach out to us to talk about any of these groups you might want to get involved in. We can help make those connections.
Yeah.
You?
So this slide, I hope everybody is familiar with. You've seen this before. One of the things that I said to Timmy when we were talking about this is there's opportunities to get connected and to get support. And so definitely connecting and staying in tune with the meetings, the in-person meetings, the trainings, are all opportunities to learn more. In a 1-hour conversation, we don't get everything that we need to when we're thinking about boards and how to have the best boards that we can have. But this is an opportunity to be connected to a community of people who are thinking about how to be and how to have the best boards that you can have. So we might not have touched on something else that you need, but if you stay connected with this group and continue to regularly attend the meetings, including the in-person trainings that occur, you have an opportunity just to garner great wealth in terms of knowledge and support from people who know a lot more about boards and having successful boards.
You know, before we leave this slide also, and Hugh is on right now, Hugh leads the Get On Board program. And the key things that on Get On Board that I want to share with you is that with Hugh's support, we will help train that person to understand what board membership is all about. We start with the committee process, but we'll help train that person. We will connect them with boards that fit what their desires are. And then the last point, and perhaps maybe one of the most important points, we will continue to support them. So this is not a one-time thing. We say, well, here's what you're interested in, we'll train you on this, we'll connect you to the right organization, and you're on your own. No, we stick with you as long as you want to stick with us. So you can be on you can join a board through Get On Board with us and work with us through Get On Board. And as long as you want us around, we'll be around you to help answer questions, to provide guidance. I've seen Hugh also take individuals that have interest in certain things, and he will find somebody with that type of organization or that organization and make a personal connection to the person that's seeking that support. So this is a program that Hugh drives, we're all very serious about, and we've proven that it works. We just need people that are interested. We've proven that it works. Hugh, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, now I'm going to throw at you, you see the slide here, I'm going to throw at you another rule of 3, okay? And here's my AAA for this presentation, okay? Let's talk about having a sincere attitude about diversifying your board, okay? So your first one is that, your attitude. You sincerely want to diversify your board, okay? Let's talk about your organization. Is your organization aware of what they need to do and why they need to do it? You know, you need diverse boards for so many reasons. You don't want the same opinions from every board member. Otherwise, you're never going to grow as a board. You're never going to expand as a board. You're never going to do outreach as a board, okay? And then the third A, accountability. Are you willing to hold yourself and your other board members accountable to say, no, we need to do this? So that's my AAA. That's my last rule of 3, my AAA: attitude, awareness, and accountability. I think that's our last slide, so we're open for questions.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hi, Joe.
I was just wondering if you could repeat the rule of 3, because right when you were talking about it, I got an important email from my boss and I had to like look away. Sure. And I'm so sorry, but would you mind just repeating that?
No, my pleasure. The rule of 3, and let me clarify this. I am a former HR director, and so I was involved in a lot of hiring. You're hiring for boards, and that's why I say the rule of 3 works here. The rule of 3 is, I gotta have a great job. Do I have a job that someone's interested in, okay? And the way I know that is I've got a person that's a great recruiter. That recruiter's job is to make sure you understand that this job is available, and yes, you too can do this job. And then the third rule of 3 is going to be, do I have the right manager in place to retain that person? So do I have a great job? Do I have a great recruiter and a great retention manager to keep that person in place? So it's not just a matter of saying, I got this great job at the Community Foundation that you can do. We want you to join our nonprofit organization. That's presented. The recruiter makes that sell, but the person that this new board member is going to be coming in encounter with are they also helping sell the organization? Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yes, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Think that there are also rules of three when you're thinking about administration and delivering a product. And so as I said, I worked in community mental health. And one of the things that we looked at for board members was one, were they interested in the mission, in the service that we were providing to the community? Second of all, not just interested, how much knowledge did they have? And if they didn't have as much, could we create opportunities for them to learn about the work that we were doing? And then the third thing was, if they were committed to the mission, if they had some knowledge, were they willing to advance the message of the agency? And so I think it's really important that like Timmy being invited to join an organization that he didn't understand, we have an opportunity to recruit board members who don't have to know everything about what the company is doing, but who are committed to learning and committed to advancing what they're doing. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it really is recruitment work, because not anybody will do, depending on what it is that the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Those are great examples. Thanks.
Timmy, there's a comment in the chat. Attitude, awareness, accountability. Would you talk a bit about the accountability piece?
Sure. The accountability piece is like this, is that we often say, and this is human nature, someone else needs to do that. Someone needs to make that happen. And I would suggest to every one of us, and this includes me on a daily basis, when I look in the mirror, that someone else is probably staring right back at me. So have I done what I need to do to help? So hold ourselves accountable to being part of the solution is what I say with accountability.
Yeah.
So your organization's got the right attitude. Yeah, we know what we need to do. We're aware of what we need to do. We're aware of where we need to find it. Okay. But now let's hold ourselves accountable and our counterparts accountable to say, no, we're not just going to talk about this. We're not going to just give it lip service. We're going to hold ourselves accountable to actually go out and seek people. I'll give you a quick example on the accountability piece. And this ties in with what Dr. Richelle talked about with the networking part and recruiting part. Imagine yourself at a networking event and there's 2 or 3 of you talking together. And you're standing there talking and there's someone kind of aimlessly wandering around. And you look at them, you glance at them and you know what? They're trying to find where to fit in. Okay. And so when you're recruiting, think about how you position your bodies. And humans focus on body position more than you may ever think about it. And I encourage you to check this out next time you go to a networking event. People will talk either face-to-face or in circles. So now that does not give anyone else the opportunity to join your circle if you're a triangle. But if you just slightly open that triangle, and you see another person and you make eye contact with that person and maybe beckon that person over to join your group, to introduce themselves, you introduce yourself to them. You've now just enhanced that person's self-esteem. You've included them in your circle. They are now part of the system. You are now effectively networking. So that's just one example of that accountability. Hold yourself accountable to say, yeah, Richelle and Hugh and I are together someplace and we're talking, not uncommon, but we're in a networking event. So one of us is going to open that triangle or that circle so that someone else can enter into that. And that's part of how you hold yourself accountable and say, here's my chance to bring someone else into our group.
When you think about welcoming, think about it as an opportunity to make room. Whether you're making room in a conversation that you're having with another person, where you make eye contact, whether you face that person and give them an opportunity to be included in the conversation, whether you're opening up the space where you happen to be holding the conversation. You create enough space to say to somebody who's not in the space, you're welcome in this space. And the third thing about welcoming is when you hear an idea that you've not necessarily considered, that you make room to continue the discussion of that perspective, even though it may not be one that you know about or that you necessarily agree with. So welcoming is really requires action. You have to open up your space, your psyche, to be able to let people come in and to share themselves with you in a way that allows you to get to know them.
Excellent. Terry, does that help?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you. No. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Yeah, and I'll share something else with you, is that as Dr. Richelle and I have talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not unusual for people to get a little bit tight when you bring those terms up, because people tend to think, okay, now I'm going to get blamed for something. That's not the intent. The intent is for all of us to be aware of how to bring other people into the fold. We talked about that melting pot. We talked about, sometimes the greatest soup you can have is with a lot of different ingredients, and it's amazing how things work together sometimes. But the DEI focus, if you would, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. That's a spin on DEI. That is intended not to make people to go into their shell and to get defensive, but more so to say, how can I make sure that the people that I'm around feel included? How can I make sure that people that I'm around feel as though they have some say in what we're doing and how we're operating? And that extends to the board, of course, because the person's in your boardroom for a reason, to help you make decisions. So let's do things, let's say things, let's act in ways so that person feels included enough to share their opinions and share their thoughts. And ultimately, we'll come to the right conclusions as to what decisions need to be made.
There's one thing I want to point out, Timmy, that I think you're a great example for, is that you take an active role in trying to connect people. And I think connecting people, especially when they're diverse backgrounds or whatever, you take an active role in getting out, and you should meet this person, you should meet this person. And, that I think is a real key to building a diverse, equitable, inclusive community, is that you put the extra effort in to connect people and to try to set up meetings and to try to set up where people that don't know each other or wouldn't necessarily run in the same circles get together and just spend time together and to talk about issues. I mean, these community setups that are put out here, I think, are great. And it's wonderful to see a lot of different people. But it's community is building bridges, and you have to be active in it. You have to invest resources. You have to invest time, and you have to invest in intentionality in doing that. And I think you're a great example of that.
Tom, thank you. I appreciate that. Tom, you bring up a great point, though, is that that's part of the networking that Dr. Richelle and I are talking about, is that when we meet new individuals, we need to listen, and we need to be active listeners to say, what interest does that person have? And Tom and I have done that a few times with some things to determine where a connection needs to be made. So that's a great point, Tom, you brought up, is that as you meet new individuals, think about your circle and think about, is there someone in your circle that person needs to be connected to forward their mission, or to forward the other person's mission? Maybe they need to meet the person you just met. And so, to Tom's point, make that connection. That's part of the networking. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, and Timmy mentioned earlier that sometimes as an active board member or an active recruiter, you look around to think, well, who's going to do that? And the person who's going to do that is you, the person who just voiced the question. And so we can all be connectors, introducing people to people that we think others should know. And so it's not something that we look for a Timmy in the room or a Tom in the room. Sometimes it's Richelle in the room making the connections. It's Hugh in the room making the connections, and not looking for Timmy, who seems to do it with great ease, that we do it ourselves.
And that goes back to the accountability piece once again. Let's hold ourselves accountable to do what needs to be done by someone else. Other questions or comments? You guys are making this too easy for us. I mean,
Really?
we're hoping that we brought the points home pretty well, but we are definitely open for comments or questions and other thoughts. If you have other thoughts, I mean, Tom just brought something up that wasn't in our presentation. It's a great point Tom brought up, and there's other thoughts that you have or some things that you've done to help make connections. Let's share that with the group. Some things that you have found successful for you.
What challenges have you seen, or what do you think are the greatest challenges against, committing to diversity and inclusiveness and equity?
In my experience, one of the things that I've seen is that with the best of intentions, organizations want to create a board that will support them and support them fully. And so most of the people, if not all board members, have a passion for what they're doing and can get behind it. They don't necessarily bring expertise or interest in what happens when things aren't going well. They're cheerleaders for sure, but they don't necessarily bring other expertise around issues of fund development, issues of how you get in the community when you may be viewed as doing something unpopular. And I've worked for very specific sort of community health boards. And so there are people who might have strong responses to what you're trying to do. And so all of the people on the board are cheerleaders, but they're not necessarily people who can advance multiple responses and multiple perspectives in a way that keeps the organization moving forward. So I think it's easy to fall into the trap of everybody being the same in terms of your board, and you feel very supportive, but when it comes down to the richness that's needed in diversity, you don't have it.
Here's the time for it. And we talked earlier on the slide that Dr. Richelle covered, self-examination, self-reflection. It's kind of easy to say, we're all on the same page, we're all thinking the same way, we're good. I would submit to you, if we're all on the same page all the time, we're all thinking the same way all the time, we're probably missing something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why bringing somebody in different can give you some avenues to look down that might take you on a different path and maybe something greater than what you were doing before. So
Yes.
self-reflection, self-examination. This gets difficult, and that's why we say self. We're not accusing anyone, but ask yourself, examine yourself. Do we need to do something different? If we do, am I willing to be the carrier of that change? Terry has a question about fundraising. Good, Terry, great question. That's the closest you comment in this session to refer to fundraising, which is one of the responsibilities of board members. That's a great question. And here's where unfortunately too many board members shy away. And I'll also say that the organizations kind of shy away. Part of the board's responsibility is to assist with this fundraising piece because we have those additional connections. One of the things that I have said to a couple of boards that I'm working with right now is that do we have a good elevator speech for our organization? So that no matter where I am, when I meet someone, can they succinctly and effectively tell me about the organization? And also include that in, here are some of the needs when a person expresses interest in your organization. So Chair, you're exactly right. Fundraising is something particularly nonprofit boards need to focus on, and the board of directors need to be kept in tune where you are in fundraising, why you need fundraising, and your elevator speech needs to be practiced at board meetings every now and then to make sure that we're all singing the right song.
Development should be active most of the time. Even when we feel like we have enough funds on hand to deliver the service that we're delivering, if we're forward thinking, if we're thinking about the future and the things that we want to do, then fund development becomes a helpful way of connecting with people that we can share those ideas with about what we're going to do in the future. And so while we may not always be asking for funds, we should always be helping people to think about what fund development can do for nonprofits as we continue to think about the future.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, great. I think we'll close it up for now. I want to thank everybody for their time today. There will be, this session was recorded, so it'll be on our website within 24 hours, as well as a copy of this presentation for your reference. So again, within 24 hours, just you can come back to our website and find it. Look forward to seeing you all again next month. And again, thank you, Timmy. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Richelle. I thought it was a great session. And thanks again, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All the best to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.